how exactly do toys in Poppy Playtime think? On the outside, they're just lifeless dolls, yet somehow they can process thoughts, make decisions, and even develop unique personalities. Some are highly intelligent, while others not so much. But how is that even possible? What's really going on inside their bodies? Well, the answer runs far deeper than you could possibly imagine. To truly understand it, we need to break it down character by character, because the explanation isn't the same for all of them. Let's start with Yarnaby, who relentlessly hunted us through Chapter 4 under the Doctor's command. According to documents, Yarnaby wasn't very smart, making him easy to manipulate and blindly loyal to the Doctor. This lack of intelligence might be directly linked to the orphan he was created from, Quinn Navidson. Quinn was never the sharpest tool in the shed, he was physically skilled, but his performance in Game Station's mental tests was consistently below average.
Welcome to Musical Memory. This advanced memory and cognitive recognition test is designed to stimulate several segments of the brain.
The key factor here is that even as a child, he could still be easily manipulated, which is exactly what happened when the Doctor convinced him to try harder at the Game Station tests, and when he did, his performance improved. This suggests that his susceptibility to influence was just a natural trait of his brain, one that carried over when he was turned into Yarnaby. Speaking of his brain, its placement raises a lot of questions. One of the biggest being, how does it not rip in half when Yarnaby opens his horizontal mouth? Well, what if his brain isn't actually in the usual spot? It's possible that Yarnaby's brain is located inside the yarn-covered portion of his body rather than within his head. And this wouldn't be the first time Playtime Co. placed an experiment's brain in an unorthodox location. Just look at the Doctor, whose brain was literally stored in a jar. If this theory is true, then Yarnaby's brain could be connected to the rest of his body through a network of veins and wires, some of which could run directly to the two sides of his face. These wires might be designed to move independently, allowing Yarnaby's face to split open without disrupting his brain's functionality. This would make Yarnaby a particularly unique experiment, one whose very biology defies traditional expectations. It could be a similar case with Huggy Wuggy, our old friend who we'll finally be reuniting with in Chapter 5. We don't know all the details about his experiment process, but we do know that he was intentionally designed to have immense strength, as he was meant to serve as Playtime Co.'s security guard. Now, some might argue that Huggy doesn't actually think, that he's just a mindless beast driven purely by instinct given how ruthlessly he attacked us during every encounter, but that could not be further from the truth.
Experiment 1170, Huggy Wuggy, remains the optimal outcome due to his sufficient intelligence paired with maximum obedience. End of log.
When considering this and the way that Huggy calmly stood in front of a house after escaping the factory, it becomes clear that Huggy Wuggy must have a functioning brain that allows him to think and feel. If he didn't, he would either be permanently aggressive or permanently docile, completely incapable of taking orders from anyone. But what if his brain isn't entirely biological? I know, it sounds impossible, but the evidence supporting this idea is actually more shocking than you might think. We already know that the prototype is a hybrid of organic and mechanical components. His claw contains visible mechanical parts, yet we also know he possesses a digestive tract, as confirmed by Chapter 1's trailer. So, what if Huggy is built the same way? It's entirely possible that his brain isn't purely organic, but instead incorporates digitalized components, making him a biomechanical hybrid. The strongest piece of evidence for this comes from the spin-off title Project Playtime, where Huggy is telepathically communicated with.
See the location of every puzzle pillar. Protect them. Kill everyone in sight.
If his brain were completely organic, that surely wouldn't even be possible, so all the evidence points to it containing mechanical components. But after his fall into the depths, these parts may have been damaged or completely destroyed, leaving him with only the biological portions of his brain intact. If that's the case, it could end up playing a major role in Chapter 5's story, potentially explaining why Huggy acts the way he does when we finally encounter him again. Now, moving on to the nightmare critters, their biology is actually better documented thanks to Chapter 4's ARG, which provided us with experiment report notes. These reports strongly suggest that before the Bigger Bodies initiative was introduced, before giant toys like Huggy and Mommy Longlegs were created, Playtime Co. was first conducting experiments on miniature toys instead, such as the Nightmare Critters. Initially, their attempts at using systematic tissues to reactivate the subject's brain were unsuccessful. However, after further experimentation, they eventually figured it out, allowing the miniature experiments to actually live. Just like Huggy Wuggy, these smaller toys are not just mindlessly hostile, even if they appear to be. In fact, according to a marketing campaign from Mob Entertainment, these experiments once got along well with the smiling critters. This proves they can feel affection, meaning their brains must function just like any other sentient beings. And all of this was only made possible due to Playtime Co.'s extensive trial and error in perfecting their experiments, but this raises a huge question. How would fully functional brains even fit into such tiny toys? One possibility is that the brains were carefully reduced in size through delicate surgical procedures, removing unnecessary sections while keeping the crucial components intact. Alternatively, it's possible that these brains were never large to begin with. Instead, Playtime Co. could have sourced them from small test subjects. And let's not forget what we already know, Playcare had cribs. This confirms that babies were present inside the facility, and considering the horrors Playtime Co. has already committed, it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that infants were used in the experiments as well. To make matters worse, if you listen closely to the Chapter 3 teaser trailer, the sounds of children screaming don't just belong to older kids. There are toddler and baby voices mixed in too. This brings us to another unsettling case, Boxy Boo, the very first of the Bigger Bodies. Unfortunately, his experiment note doesn't provide much insight into his biology. While an image of his blueprints was found in the Project Playtime ARG, it only seems to reference his toy version, not his experiment form, so it doesn't really help us here. What we do know, however, is that Boxy Boo was designed with a singular purpose, eliminating any employee who posed a threat to Playtime Co. His entire function revolved around consuming people, and according to the previously mentioned marketing campaign, he was nothing more than an all-around greedy jack-in-the-box. But here's where Boxy stands out from the rest. He doesn't seem to experience any real emotions. Unlike other experiments, he isn't driven by fear, anger, or loyalty. Instead, he's just a violent, insatiable predator whose hunger is never satisfied. And given the way his mouth opens, completely deforming his head in the process, this leads me to a bold conclusion. Boxy Boo has no brain. Unlike other Bigger Bodies, Boxy likely only possesses vital organs such as a heart and a digestive system, but when it comes to thinking and reasoning, he's completely incapable. He's just a mindless eating machine. Although, it's a completely different story with our final toy, Doey the Doughman. As arguably the most biologically unique Bigger Body, Doey is clearly capable of feeling a wide range of emotions. In fact, his emotional instability is his defining trait. Throughout Chapter 4, he constantly shifts between different personalities, making his behavior highly unpredictable.
Hurt. Everything hurts. Hurt back. Always hurt back. Parents, scientists, everyone have to. My friends. He killed my friends.
This is because Doey was created using 3 different test subjects: a mature teenager, an angry child, and a mischievous kid who, unlike the others, was not an orphan. This fusion of 3 separate minds meant that Doey could never truly think straight, as at any given moment, one of his 3 consciouses would take over. But how is this even possible? Well, Doey's internal structure might be the most complex organic system out of any of the Bigger Bodies. The most logical explanation is that Doey retains all 3 brains from his original test subjects. The goofy child's brain is likely stored in Doey's head, as this personality seems to be the most dominant one seen throughout Chapter 4. The other 2 brains, belonging to the angry and mature personalities, are likely contained somewhere else inside his body. His biology may be designed so that only one brain at a time receives blood flow, allowing it to temporarily take control over his entire thought process. If this system is randomly timed, it would explain why Doey's personality shifts happen so suddenly and unpredictably. Ultimately, this means Doey only thinks using whichever brain is currently in an active state, making his thought system fundamentally different from that of any other experiment in Playtime Co. What do you think about all this? Let me know your theories in the comments. Also, you don't want to miss this next video on the screen.